Two people from the same family have been killed by Houthi landmine blasts in Hodeidah province. International humanitarian partners urge donors to remain committed to Yemen. Israeli military orders evacuation of parts of Rafah city ahead of a possible ground invasion. Welcome to Yemen Today TV. This is English News with me, Shazab Dirbey. Two brothers were killed by a Houthi landmine explosion in Hodeidah, western Yemen. A local source said that two brothers were killed by the explosion of a mine attributed to the Houthi militia behind the Red Sea Mills, east of Al-Hadi district in Hodeidah. The militia continues to plant landmines in residential areas and near main roads in clear violation of the UN-Hodeidah agreement. The Shelter Cluster Organization reported that the heavy rains and floods affected more than 37,000 people in Yemen. The organization added that it took the initiative to expand its emergency response, providing shelter and basic household supplies to about 9,000 affected people. The organization confirmed its commitment, along with its partners, to providing more assistance to those affected by the floods to fight the effects of climate change. Internal displacement cases in Yemen recorded a slight decrease last week, most of which were in Ma'rib. The International Organization for Migration stated in its weekly report on tracking displacement that it monitored 32 families consisting of 192 people who were displaced for the first time between April 28 and May 4 this year. In addition, displacement cases recorded last week decreased by 18% compared to the previous week, in which 39 families or 234 people were displaced. About 200 aid groups appealed on Monday for funding to bridge a $2.3 billion shortfall in assistance for war-torn Yemen. The aid groups warned of potentially catastrophic consequences for Yemen. This report has more details.
A joint statement from 188 humanitarian organizations, including several UN agencies, warned that 18.2 million people, more than half of the population, were in need of help after 9 years of war between Houthi rebels and a Saudi-led coalition. Their appeal came a day before a meeting of high-ranking EU officials in Brussels to discuss the aid program for Yemen, which is suffering one of the world's worst humanitarian crises. The statement said inaction would have catastrophic consequences for the lives of Yemeni women, children, and men, calling Tuesday's meeting a critical moment. The humanitarian community appeals to donors to urgently address existing funding gaps and provide sustainable support to enhance resilience and reduce aid dependency. According to the United Nations, hundreds of thousands have died in the fighting or from indirect causes such as a lack of food. Hostilities slowed considerably in April 2022 when a 6-month UN-brokered ceasefire came into effect, and they have remained at a low level ever since. But only $435 million of the $2.7 billion called for in Yemen's 2024 humanitarian response plan requirement has been raised. The aid group said, warning of threats including food insecurity, cholera, and unexploded ordnance. Underfunding poses a challenging to the continuity of humanitarian programming, causing delays, reductions, and suspensions of life-saving assistance programs. These challenges directly affect the lives of millions who depend on humanitarian assistance and protection services for survival.
The Houthi militia stormed a village in Bajil district in Hodeidah, kidnapping civilians who refused to evacuate their homes to host Houthi supporters. Local sources reported that the militia is putting pressure on people to leave their lands under the pretext of judicial ruling issued by a court subject to it. Activists have circulated video clips showing the militia assaulting women and children in the village as part of a wide displacement campaign by the Houthis. In a report submitted to the United Nations High Rights Council in Geneva, Yemen's government stated that Hodeida's Red Sea ports have become center for smuggling Iranian weapons. The government stated that the Houthis refused to achieve their obligations under the Stockholm Agreement, refusing to send military forces and threatening international navigation. The government added that the Houthis also refused to hand over the maps of landmines. The Western Fleet in Saudi Arabia launched a mixed naval exercise for countries bordering the Red Sea. In addition, titled the Red Wave 7, the initiative is represented by naval, land, and air forces, border guard units, and forces from Jordan, Egypt, Djibouti, and Yemen. The exercise aims to enhance the maritime security of the countries bordering the Red Sea, and the participating forces are going to carry out many combat exercises, such as surface, air, and electronic warfare, countering attacks by speedboats, and protecting maritime shipping lines. UNESCO confirmed in its report that Yemeni journalists face major obstacles in searching for and distributing information on many issues, especially in the war-torn country. The first quarterly report of the Yemeni Journalist Syndicate for this year documented 17 cases of violations against media freedoms in the country. This report has more details.
The United Nations Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization UNESCO has affirmed that risks facing journalists in Yemen are not confined to addressing political issues. Instead, they extend to addressing and covering environmental crises in this country, which has been globally classified as one of the nations severely affected by climate change. Marking the World Press Freedom Day this year, UNESCO highlighted in a report that Yemeni journalists continue to brave danger to report on crucial issues, including the environmental crises affecting their country. Yemen, already burdened by conflict, faces a myriad of environmental challenges. Over the past decade, climate change-induced natural disasters, including floods, cyclones, landslides, and roads, have caused extensive damage in the country. Yemen has faced several significant environmental challenges over the past year, exacerbated by ongoing conflict, worsening humanitarian, economic, and environmental conditions. Journalistic work is crucial, providing the public with reliable information, insightful analysis, and a comprehensive understanding of the issues directly affecting them. According to UNESCO reporting on environmental crises, amidst conflict and political instability represents numerous challenges. Journalists encounter significant hurdles in seeking and disseminating information, especially in a war-torn country like Yemen. According to the Yemeni Journalists Syndicate's first quarterly report of this year, cases of violations against media freedom were documented. These violations include restrictions on freedom, assaults on journalists and press institutions, and property confiscations. In addition to dealing with physical, economic, political, psychological, digital, and legal threats, accessing reliable information in times of crisis can be also challenging.
The United Nations recognizes the invaluable work of journalists and media professionals to ensure that the public is informed and engaged. Without facts, we cannot fight mis and disinformation. Without accountability, we will not have strong policies in place. Without press freedom, we won't have any freedom. A free press is not a choice, but a necessity. Our World Press Freedom Day is very important. And so I call on governments, the private sector, and civil society to join us in reaffirming our commitment to safeguarding press freedom and the rights of journalists and media professionals around the world.
According to Egyptian media, a high-ranking source stated that the Palestinian resistance bombing of the Kerem Shalom area caused truce negotiations with Israel to fail. Yesterday, the Palestinian resistance fired rockets at Israeli army gatherings in the Kerem Shalom area. Israel responded by bombing a missile launching pad and a military target in Rafah in southern Gaza Strip. Meanwhile, the Egyptian security delegation is intensifying its contacts to contain the current escalation between Hamas and Israel. The Israeli occupation army said that the evacuation operation from the Palestinian east of Rafah includes about 100,000 people, according to the Cairo News Channel. On Monday, the Israeli occupation army ordered citizens east of the Palestinian Rafah to immediately evacuate and move to the center of the Strip, citing that the prospect of a ground attack on the heavily populated city. The UN Relief and Works Agency for Palestine Refugees, UNRWA, announced on Monday that it will not evacuate its sites in Rafah in Gaza, affirming to remain there for as long as possible to provide aid. On Twitter, the agency stated that an Israeli offensive in Rafah would mean more civilian suffering and deaths. The consequences would be devastating for 1.4 million people. UNRWA was recently accused by Israel of involvement in the October 7 incident, but independent investigation committees found no evidence to support this claim. Coming next in the news. Unpaid Yemeni teachers continue to struggle with living conditions amid the conflict.
As you can see today, this is one of our classes where we are having children aged starting from 9, 10, who have not been enrolled in the formal education, but in countries like Yemen, that has been suffering from a protracted conflict since 2014, more families and children are internally displaced. As these children and families move from one location to another, their access to education is interrupted. Even when families are prioritizing their children's education, schools in the host communities might find it very hard to accommodate the increased number of children who are coming and want to go back to school. And the result is more children are out of school across the country. UNICEF, in collaboration with its partners and with support from ECHO, is providing these families, children and communities with a second chance to education through its accelerated emergency learning programs, as we have been working with families, communities and children to increase their awareness of the importance of education. We have been seeing more children coming to our classes every single day.
Welcome back. The Houthi militia forced educators and students to attend summer camps for sectarian teachings, according to academic sources in Houthi-controlled regions. The Houthi militia pushed more than 5,000 employees and students, most of whom are women, to the main center of the adult education in Sana'a to receive military training and ideological reform. Educational sources accused the Houthi militia of reducing adult education centers under its control into places of mobilization. Teachers in Yemen celebrate their National Day amid difficult economic and living conditions. After a decade-long civil war, salary suspensions have prompted desperate teachers to seek alternative forms of income. This report has more details.
At morning, he practices his profession as a teacher, and after the day ends, he begins the journey of searching for his living. The teacher Shihab Omar is one of thousands of teachers who works in the morning as a teacher, enlightening the minds of young generations, and after his work ends, he turns into an electrician. Extra work has become an inevitable necessity to provide the basic needs of his family.
Extra work for the teacher has become a necessity in order that the teacher meets his family's needs. He adds to work in a field besides education in light of the deterioration of the local currency. It becomes a must in order to pay the rent of my house and to support my family.
Shahab's story is not exceptional, but rather a small example of the suffering of a wide segment of workers in Yemen. who have become victims of Houthis' war that ravaged the country, cut their salaries, and made them face the bitterness of living, in addition to the wages that are no longer available in its simplest form.
Salaries are not enough. They are too little. They do not meet the needs of the teacher. The salaries do not meet the needs of the teachers. Salaries are now very little in comparison with the situation before. In the past, the teacher could adapt his life according to the salary he receives. But now, because salaries are quite low, teachers are opted to seek other jobs.
The teachers in Yemen are reeling under the circumstances of war that go beyond their own lives, but also reflect on the whole educational process. The teachers are not able to meet their basic necessities, and they are forced to look for other sources of income, which have a negative impact on their psychology and their role as messengers of knowledge.
A UN report expects that Yemen's food insecurity crisis is going to continue to deteriorate until the third quarter of this year. The food security situation report stated that the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization said that food insecurity in Yemen is expected to worsen starting next June and continue to deteriorate until September. The Saudi project Massam for demining in Yemen announced that it has removed more than 700 landmines, unexploded ordnance, and explosive devices. This includes 2 anti-personnel mines, 83 anti-tank mines, 631 unexploded ordnance, and 3 explosive devices, bringing the total items removed during the month of April until May 3 to more than 2,700 mines. Since its launch in 2018, Massam project has contributed to demining in Yemen, along with other mine action actors. The King Salman Humanitarian Aid and Relief Center launched the voluntary medical program for open heart surgery in Yemen through Al Balsam Organization for Health Training and Development. The program is an extension of the various voluntary medical programs implemented by the center across many countries to provide treatment to individuals and families with limited income. The Balsam Society medical team, which includes 24 doctors, nurses, and technicians, arrived in the city of Adan on Saturday to perform a lineup of surgeries and cardiac surgeries for adults and children in cooperation with local doctors. Residents of Hadramaut's coastal areas reported that the frequent blackouts have exacerbated their suffering, especially now that summer has set in and the temperatures are rising. This report has more details.
With the advent of the summer season, the citizens of Hadramaut Governorate started their home preparations by purchasing electrical charging devices, batteries, and operating motors so they can survive the extreme heat and humidity of the summer, accompanied by continuous power outages.
What electricity are you talking about? We have been suffering for 10 years now and no one is doing anything about it.
This is not an individual issue, The whole society is suffering from a lack of electricity, especially the elders. Whatever I say, you can never imagine the amount of struggle we have to go through every single day.
Citizens try several means to overcome the heat of the atmosphere and the suffering of power outages, a suffering that has burdened residents, business owners, and owners of small projects, resulting in a halt of their businesses. The Hadramaut Electricity Corporation began breaking its silence and appealed for the necessity of providing electricity, fuel, and diesel for power stations in light of their scarcity.
May God have mercy on Ali Abdullah Saleh. Our situation was a lot better back then, but now everything is ruined. The governorate is not able to provide electricity to its citizens. That is a great issue.
Hadramaut Governorate, which is rich in oil derivatives and other resources, is experiencing a generation deficit, while the districts of Hadramaut Coast are in need of a generating capacity, estimated at 380 megawatts, while the Electricity Corporation provides approximately 200 megawatts. Such a generation deficit has increased the severity of the citizens' suffering due to the continuous power outages and without any solution in hand.
Here's a reminder of the main headlines. 2 people from the same family have been killed by Houthi landmine blast in Hodeidah province. International humanitarian partners urge donors to remain committed to Yemen. Israeli military orders evacuation of parts of Rafah city ahead of a possible ground invasion. This is the end of the news. Thank you for watching.